I'm Tracie, the Better Coach, and welcome to my YouTube channel, where I help women thrive after breakups, date better the next time around, and generally protect their peace in spite of all of life's ups and downs. I'm glad you're here, and let's get into it. In this video, I'll walk you through a process for determining what to do about your relationship. I'll share some questions for you to ask yourself to help you determine if you should stay or leave. By the way, if you find any of this information helpful, don't forget to like this video by clicking the thumbs up down below. It helps YouTube recommend this video to other people who may get some benefit from it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so that you can get alerts for every new video drop. Let's start with the fact that if you are even entertaining the idea of staying in or leaving your relationship, then you are likely not content with the way things are. Maybe there are things about your partner or their behavior that you would like to be different. Maybe you and your partner struggle to get along and work as a team, or maybe your own development and growth have had you outgrow aspects of the relationship. Whatever the reasons, you are wondering if remaining in your relationship is a good idea, or if exiting stage left is better for you and others. And surprise, surprise, there's no objective answer to whether you should stay in or leave your relationship. This is an assessment that you must make for yourself based on your desires, needs, and life circumstances. So, how do you do this assessment? You want to start by knowing what you want in your own life so that you can determine what you want and need out of a partner and a romantic relationship. A great way to start this process of knowing what you want is by doing something that I call the life goals timeline, and you can get more information about that by watching this video and starting from the 3-minute 45-second mark, where I go into a little more detail on how to create this timeline. Once you have a good sense of what you want and need, there are 5 key areas to assess regarding your relationship. I will refer to them as relationship quality, your quality tolerance, your practical needs, your emotional needs, and the relationship potential. Notes. For each of these 5 categories, you're going to ask yourself a scaling question. This means you're going to rate each category on a scale from 0 to 10, and depending on the category, 0 to 10 may mean different things. So I will explain those as we move through each category. Category number 1, relationship quality. This is a good time to use something that I call the ideal partner list. This is where you make a list of the traits and qualities and life circumstances of your ideal partner. So if you waved a magic wand and the person who is ideal for you magically appeared, what would be this person's physical traits, life circumstances, personality characteristics, etc.? And you make a list with as many items as you can think of, and you then use that list to assess where your current partner stands with these various things. There's a more in-depth process to this to really help you hone in on like your deal breakers versus your preferences. And this is something that people who are on my email list get access to. If you're on my email list, you'll eventually get an email that has a video of me walking you through this process step by step and in more detail, in a way that you can use this ideal partner list for dating if you are looking to get into a future relationship, and for your current relationship to really help you assess where it lies. But for our purposes today, in this video, the basics are to really write down the ideal qualities and traits of your ideal partner so that you can get a sense as to whether those things exist for you right now in your current relationship. Some questions to ask yourself for this category are: is there mutual attraction between you and your partner? Do you feel there's reciprocity? So reciprocity is a foundational aspect of any healthy relationship of any kind. It can be a friendship, a co-working relationship, anything, where you feel that there is a balance of give and take in the relationship. I take and I give, and you take and you give, and it feels pretty balanced. Also, the question of equitability. Does the relationship feel equitable? And in this case, we're referring to how you show up for one another, oftentimes in a lot of like practical ways, because a lot of times couples talk about wanting things to be equal, which is technically a 50-50 split, and that is not how life happens. It rarely happens in 50-50 splits of anything. Equitability is more about the fairness of the circumstances and the percentages. So if I do 60% of childcare and you do 40%, that maybe feels fair because you do 70% of something and I do 30% of that thing. So that is what equitability is, and that is a fair goal for couples to strive for. So you want to ask yourself, does my relationship feel equitable? And then also you want to ask the general question of, does this relationship contribute to my wellness or tend to take away from my wellness? Generally speaking, do I feel well and fed into from this relationship, or do I feel totally drained and like I'm pouring out too much, or too much is being taken? In essence, does it feel like a burden to me rather than feeding into my wellness? So then, after asking yourself those questions and doing that ideal partner assessment, you want to rate this category on a scale of 0 to 10. So in this case, we would say 0 means very low quality, poor quality, like there's pretty much nothing there for you, all the way up to 10 being wonderful, high quality relationship for you. It's giving you the majority of the things you need and it feels great. And then obviously there can be anything in between. So you want to pick a number on that scale to rate this category. So in this next category, quality tolerance, you are assessing your level of tolerance for the current quality of the relationship. So for instance, you could have determined that your relationship is a poor quality relationship or a low quality relationship, but you may have high tolerance for dealing with that. So this section is about rating your tolerance level for whatever the quality of your relationship is. So some questions to ask yourself are, what can I tolerate? Some people have more tolerance for arguing and tension than others do. The back and forth cycle of like things being really good and then things being really bad can be very exhausting for most people, but still we all vary in our levels for being able to tolerate that and still be okay. An interesting example of this is when you see couples who have similar tolerance levels for arguing and tension. And what I mean is the couple who you see who are arguing all the time, and people may think to themselves, how are they still together? Because they're always arguing. If they both have higher tolerance for that tension threshold, we could say, then it might work for them in terms of the fact that they may be the type of people who kind of feel that they spew when they're arguing, and it was all left in the argument, and when the argument is over and tension and their feelings are more regulated, then they're able to go on about it. But what can happen is you can have two people who have differing tolerance levels for this, and so that looks like a couple where one person maybe has that higher tolerance for the tension, and they think, oh, we argue, and when the argument's over, it's over, and we feel okay. And the other person, there may be a cumulative effect of these arguments or this tension. And so after each argument, even when the argument is over, they are still carrying that weight, that emotional weight, in a way that it just keeps adding up over time until there's a point where it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And then you may see people break up for reasons around it just being too exhausting to continue to relate the way they do. And so that's just an example of like differing tolerance levels, in this case for like tension. But ultimately this category is about you assessing your tolerance level for the quality of the relationship overall. So it doesn't just have to involve arguing and tension. There may be things that from category number 1 you determined are not there that you would like to be there when it comes to your partner or your relationship. And you're asking yourself your tolerance levels for those things. It could be how much they help around the house, or it can be finances, or it can be, and insert any criteria that you have determined to be important to you. But in this category of quality tolerance, you are wanting to look at your ability to tolerate the current quality of the relationship. Some other questions to ask yourself are you settling or are you compromising? We all hear that relationships take compromise. Not only romantic relationships though, anytime you're engaging with another human being, there's a certain level of compromise. Again, this can be a coworker, this can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a stranger. If you're in the same space, there might be compromises that you need to make. Maybe you need to move over on the bench a little bit so there's room for them, stuff like that. So compromising is not unique to romantic relationships, but we seem to kind of make it that way, which then I think puts a lot of pressure on us to compromise, which sometimes spills over into settling. And so the way I generally deem this is you compromise on your preferences, you don't compromise on your deal breakers. And this goes back to that ideal partner list and kind of the more detailed questions that you would ask yourself about it. Again, if you're on my email list, you'll get access to that. But it's being able to determine the things on that ideal partner list that are preferences for you, which are things that are not so high value that it's okay for you to compromise on, versus things that are deal breakers, which are so high value that compromising on them will leave you unhappy and unfulfilled. This can lead to bitterness and resentment kills relationships. So you want to ask yourself, am I compromising here with this relationship, or am I settling? Another question to ask yourself is it worth it? Whatever you've determined about the quality of your relationship and what you can tolerate, you want to ask yourself, does this ultimately feel worth it to me? And there are a number of factors that you would take into account as to whether it feels worth it. Everything from your children to finances to your current living circumstances, your lifestyle, whatever it is. But generally asking yourself, how worth it does this feel? Another scaling question that is within this category is scaling on a level of burdensome to relieving. So let's say the scale is, how burdensome does this relationship feel to me on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 meaning not burdensome at all, and it feels, good and peaceful, and again, like it's feeding into me, all the way up to 10, which is like a huge burden, a huge weight. So then you ask yourself that question and pick a number on that scale. And so that is just a mini scaling question within this overall question about your tolerance. So for instance, if you determine that this relationship is at like a 10 in how burdensome it is, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a huge weight for me, the ultimate question that you're asking yourself about this category is my ability to tolerate that. Maybe I'm a 10 at tolerating it, and I take it on and I can handle the fact that it's hugely burdensome to me, and I can continue to function okay with that, versus somebody who's lower on that scale of tolerance and they're like, listen, I'm at like a 2 for being able to really tolerate the aspects of this relationship that are not working out for me. So ultimately, for category number 2 of quality tolerance, you want to rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10 as to how much you can tolerate the current quality of your relationship. 0 being no tolerance at all, 10 being you have high tolerance for being able to manage or tolerate the current state of the relationship. The next question you're asking yourself is your practical needs, and ultimately your practical dependence on your partner or your relationship. And actually, the level of dependence that you have on your partner or your relationship to get your practical needs met. So this is things around money and housing and food and parenting and just the practical aspects of having a life. You're wanting to ask yourself, how dependent on my partner in this relationship am I for these practical needs? So that in theory, if I were to leave this relationship, how much disruption would it cause to my life on a practical level? What are things that I would need to reorganize or get in place in order to continue to function and live my life? The scale that you are using for this question is on a scale of 0 to 10, how dependent am I on this relationship for my practical needs to be met? 0 would mean I don't have much dependence on this person or this relationship. I can handle all of these things on my own. It wouldn't be too challenging from a practical level to have things in order. I could move if I needed to, or whatever the things are you would need to do. All the way up to 10, where you are fully and highly dependent on your partner. Maybe they pay all the bills. Maybe you wouldn't have any form of child care if you didn't have them. Maybe you don't have your own transportation, whatever the things are, but 10 would be highly dependent on them. So you simply want to be able to rate yourself on this scale of how practically dependent you are on your partner. This helps you answer the question of what is getting in my way of leaving from a practical standpoint. So if you determine that the relationship quality is poor and that you have poor tolerance levels or low tolerance levels for dealing with the poor quality of the relationship, so you might say to yourself, yeah, I need to go. But if you find yourself not really going and making that move, one of the next questions you're wanting to ask yourself is, are there any practical aspects that are stopping me from making a move to leave a relationship that I have determined is poor quality and I do not have much tolerance for dealing with? So this question helps you really assess where you are with the practical dependency in your relationship. Hey there, if anything about this video has been helpful to you, I strongly encourage you to join my email list, which you can join by clicking the link in this video description. And by being a part of my email list, you get access to exclusive content from me that isn't always on the YouTube channel, things where I go a little more in depth on certain concepts that I share with you around recovering from breakups and dating. Also, by joining my email list, you will get a PDF copy of the How to Get Over Your Ex cheat sheet, and you will receive weekly emails from me with helpful tips and guidance around recovering from breakups. The next question you're asking yourself, which is category 4, is regarding your emotional dependency on your partner and your relationship. So the scaling question you will be asking yourself is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how emotionally dependent am I on my partner or this relationship? 0 would mean not emotionally dependent at all and feel very comfortable and happy and free without being with this person. 10 being highly overly emotionally dependent on this person, where I look to them to kind of fuel my happiness, my joy, all of these various things in my life. So the reality is, it can be a clear leave on paper, and yet emotional needs can be a huge factor for people staying in relationships that they identify are not good for them on paper. So when I say it can be a leave on paper, is you could have done those assessments in those previous categories and determined, like, this is a poor quality relationship, there's not much here for me, I'm really not good about tolerating it or don't want to tolerate it, so by those standards I should go, I should leave. And yet I find myself not doing that. Why? Again, you look at your practical aspects, as I mentioned in the previous category, but then you're also looking at the emotional aspects. Ultimately, are there emotional things that are keeping me from leaving a relationship that I maybe have determined is a poor quality relationship, and I can handle the practical things if I need to, but I'm still here? And a lot of the emotional aspects are things around a fear of loneliness, or fear of hurting the other person, or fear of the other person not even being okay if you do leave. Some people are with partners who are struggling with mental health conditions or substance abuse condition that are maybe not being treated or managed, and they can really have a strong concern about that person being okay, which does bring up another question of asking yourself if you feel that you are responsible for making someone else be okay, or helping them be okay, or sacrificing your life and quality of life for them to not hurt themselves or not go down a spiral. Or where's that line of helping support them to get access to the things they need and holding them accountable for engaging in those things, because you obviously cannot control someone else's choice to engage in treatment of any kind or to not do something, but you can be a supportive partner in helping them get access to it, and then determine from there where your responsibility lies in terms of them choosing to actually utilize their tools and engage in the help that they need and things like that, which brings up a whole other question around codependency and enabling and things like that. But ultimately, in this category, you are asking yourself the questions around your emotional involvement and dependence on your partner, and asking yourself if there are any emotional things that are keeping you from moving forward with leaving the relationship, if you've determined that it is a relationship that practically makes sense for you to leave. So again, the scaling question you're asking yourself is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how emotionally dependent am I on my partner? The last category that you're assessing is the relationship potential. So what I mean here is the potential for the relationship to improve in the ways that you need it to improve. The potential for the relationship to be the type of relationship you need it and want it to be. You're going to rate this on a scale of 0 to 10. So 0 is like low faith, no possibility for the relationship being the type of relationship that you need it and want it to be, or for your partner to be the partner that you need and want them to be. 10 being high potential and high faith that that things are happening that need to happen, and at a rate that they need to happen in order for the relationship and your partner to be what you need them to be. So to start, I do think this is a category that can get a lot of people slipped up, because a lot of people, as we say, fall in love with someone's potential or stay in situations for the potential of the situation. And the key here is that technically then anyone could do that, because nobody has a crystal ball to predict the future of what something or someone will and won't become. So what you're really wanting to look at is, are things currently changing at a pace and to an intensity that they need to change? Meaning, whatever shifts you're needing to see happen, and this could be with you, with your partner, the state of the relationship itself, you as a person, all the aspects that involve this relationship going well. Are they moving along at a pace that makes sense, and are they moving along to an extent that makes sense? Because there can also be this aspect of seeing incremental changes little by little that happen way too late, where one could say, well, things are moving in the right direction, but the question is, will they be where they need to be in the time frame you need them to be in? That time frame is a subjective choice for yourself, And it completely, of course, depends on the actual aspects that we're talking about of things changing. Let's just say, for example, you want to have kids in the next, 2 years, and your partner is like, I'm not sure about kids, or maybe they're saying they don't really want them. You have now this 2-year time frame to determine if they're going to be at the point that they need to be in order to want to have children with you. Well, what are you noticing about what they're telling you, or about their behaviors, or about the plans they're making for the future? These are the things you're wanting to pay attention to determine for yourself if there's enough change and at a rapid enough pace for those standards that you have to be met. Another good question to ask yourself is kind of this timeline question. Do you see yourself in this relationship at X amount of time from now if nothing about the current circumstances change? So if nothing about the current circumstances of the relationship or your partner change, do you see yourself in this relationship 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, for a lifetime? Really imagine those scenarios, and this helps you to pinpoint a general timeline by which you would choose to exit the relationship if things were not where you need them to be. So if you ask yourself, do I see myself doing this for a lifetime? And you're like, yeah, no, not for the rest of my life. Okay, so that means at some point I would leave if things don't change. So what is that time frame? Can I do it for another 5 years? That feels kind of, my kids will be this old, or I will be this old, or I want to have done this thing. What about 2 years from now? Can I do this in the next 6 months? Do I see myself in this relationship by the end of this year? By the time certain holidays roll around, do I see myself still in this relationship? That is a very helpful assessment to do, to kind of walk yourself backwards, because it helps you start to narrow in on a time frame for things needing to change or shift in order for you to stay in the relationship. And another good assessment as part of the relationship potential is you guys' ability to communicate. Because without being able to effectively communicate, it leaves very little room for change, for things to shift. Because you need to be able to talk to one another about what your concerns are, about the things that you see going well, and you need to be able to talk to one another effectively in order to problem solve as a team. So if you have a partner who's closed off to talking about tough things, or arguments just always explode and you guys can never have effective conversations, these sort of things are definitely aspects to consider when you think about the potential for the relationship. Now, I think an obvious thing here when we bring up things around communication and having a hard time being able to do that with your partner is the idea of going to some sort of couples counseling in order to work on those things. I've never met a couple in couples counseling that wasn't there to work on communication. Never. So to that, I explain to people though that communication involves so many aspects. It involves the words we are saying, the tone of our voice, our eye contact, our facial expressions, our body language, the things we are saying versus the things we aren't saying. It's all there. You cannot not communicate. You can never not communicate. Every single second that we are alive, we are communicating something to someone. So even when it's not intentional, which is one of the tricky things about communicating, especially if you are a parent, you will notice that you are communicating certain things to your children at any given moment, and they're picking up on things that you may not even realize they're picking up on. Conversation for another day. But my point here is that obviously communication is a very important thing, and I think it can be a very tricky thing. And so there is always the possibility and the option of seeking out professional help around any of the issues in your relationship, obviously. But when I'm talking about this idea of potential for the relationship, when you're really trying to decide if you should stay in your relationship or leave it, the communication piece is a huge one. Side note on couples counseling. Couples statistically wait too long to enter counseling, and they enter it as like a last-ditch effort for their relationship as opposed to a proactive measure. And I cannot recommend enough that you go to couples counseling earlier on in your relationship in order to make sure you're on the same page about certain things, notice where you're not on the same page, and be proactive about working them out. It's like going to the doctors for a physical to be proactive about your health rather than waiting until your arm is about to fall off. You're going to have a much greater chance of success if you went to the doctors during the physical to catch whatever issue was going on in advance rather than waiting until you are in dire straits. So mind you, if you are currently at the point of determining whether to stay in or leave your relationship, this idea of going to couples counseling as early as possible may be something that has passed, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't go. It is something that is up to you based on what you are wanting from this relationship. Like, are you still wanting to give it a try, or are you, pretty much done? Because people definitely also bring their partners to couples counseling in order to kind of drop them off at the therapist's doorstep because they know they're already out of the relationship and they're trying to show good effort, or like, again, a last-ditch effort, but they're already too far gone. All of these are possibilities. It is just up to you to do these assessments to determine for yourself the best move to make. So remember, in this category of relationship potential, you are asking yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, how much faith do I have in the fact that this relationship is going to be what I need it to be, that it has the potential to be what I need it to be in a time frame that I need that to happen. And just as a side note, some general questions to ask yourself about your relationship are you and your partner in alignment on various important things? Do you have, aligned values and philosophies? Do you have aligned significant life goals? A resource that I use with couples all the time that I just highly recommend to everyone is a book called The Hard Questions by Susan, I believe it's Piver. If you do go to get the book, just writing a little Amazon review that Tracie sent you, but I don't have any official deals or any connections with this author. I just know that it is a very convenient and helpful little book that has a bunch of questions about important life aspects such as parenting, intimacy, finances, these things that couples want to know that they are aligned on or can make appropriate compromises around. It's a great book to be able to read through on your own, to ask yourself questions that you probably haven't even asked yourself about how you feel about some important topics. And then it's a great book for couples to use together because it really helps you see where you are on the same page and where you are not. And those places where you are not are the places to work through. And you can try to work through them on your own. And then if you realize there are still some where that's been really challenging, you can decide to go to couples counseling about it. But it's a book that I highly recommend. So just kind of wanted to give you that little tidbit because for your purposes of deciding if you stay in or leave your relationship, this book can really help you answer some questions for yourself and answer questions with or about your partner to help you kind of make some of those determinations on the quality of the relationship for you or how much you can tolerate the quality of the relationship, things like that. So my closing thoughts on the determination of staying in or leaving a relationship are that the reality is we are oftentimes waiting around for it to be easy or to not feel guilty or to just feel good about the choice. And I'm here to say that that is highly unlikely. That even if a choice is a good choice for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to feel comfortable. The idea is that you are doing the hard thing because you've determined it's worth it and that there is potential down the road for things to be better. So whether that hard thing is staying in the relationship that you feel is making enough progress for you, so you're going to work towards it being where you want it to be, or the fact that you've done enough of that and you decided you need to go. These are things where you want to determine your why. Why am I choosing to do this hard thing? Because the reality is, it is hard to leave a relationship that you're not happy with, just as it is hard to stay in a relationship that you're not happy with. The question is, which hard do you choose? And then also there is this sense of us wanting to feel our heads and our hearts be in alignment when we make any sort of tough decision. Meaning like, okay, if I have logically seen on paper and done the assessments and seen that this thing isn't good for me, this job, this relationship, anything, I would love for, it to feel good to me and my heart be like, yeah, that's an absolute yes. But with relationships in particular, it oftentimes does not go that way. You could do this whole assessment that I walked you through and determine from an objective level that this relationship doesn't serve you. And yet your heart is going to do what hearts do. Your emotions are, likely, you're likely attached to this person and you have, time investment or certain life circumstances that are intertwined, and you are comfortable with the person and all of this sort of stuff. We can become very comfortable in our discomfort of things. So this need for our heads and our hearts to be right on board with one another in order to decide to leave a relationship, I think is a very important thing to pay attention to, and to know that that's not oftentimes how it feels. Because quite frankly, from an emotional level, if you weren't that attached to the person or that connected to the person, it likely would have been a pretty easy decision to have been gone a while ago. At least if you were not fully practically dependent on them. If you are dependent on this person for your survival and your livelihood, that obviously is a reason that will keep people in relationships that are not any good for them, because they are just trying to survive. So what I'm saying is that if there weren't an emotional connection, then it would have likely been easy for you to leave from a practical level. So this idea of I just need my heart to catch up with my head, That oftentimes does not happen in any sort of relationship where it was a significant relationship to you. A lot of times you are making that choice to leave from a place of it emotionally hurting, although you have determined practically why it's no longer for you. So that's just something to keep in mind when we are maybe sometimes waiting for it to feel good, and that rarely happens. All right, that's all I have for today. So I hope that this assessment has been helpful and has allowed you to think about important things that you need to consider when it comes to choosing to stay in or leave your relationship. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click the link to join my email list. See you soon.